Okay, so I kind of want to go ahead and sit back down and continue our coverage over Excalibur. Now, we're going to pick up with another three-part storyline, and really, this kind of picks up hours after the ending of our last video when it came to Excalibur. You see, in our last video, we had talked about the idea of the battle for Captain Britain, the idea that you basically had the dragons of the Crimson Dawn come over to Earth and try to use Captain Britain as a way to allow the Crimson Dawn to come into the main Marvel universe. Now, you had our heroes being able to win the battle, but it left Captain Britain technically powerless. And so, with him being powerless, he left the team to kind of figure out what is the next step for his life. And that right there is really important because when it came to Captain Britain leaving, it was him and Megan getting very close to the possibility of getting married. But now he had departed. He's out there in the world trying to figure out what is his next move in life without the idea of having powers in him. And the reason why I keep repeating myself in that first minute is because when it came to Megan, she did promise Brian, hey, I will be here waiting for you. I'm going to wait until you have returned. And so it did seem like at first she's going to be okay. But let's not forget, over time in Excalibur, we have seen this many times where if you had Captain Britain gone away for a period of time, for Megan, she can't handle the fact that she is alone. And so it's right now her just crying out in the rain at the moment with the idea that she feels like he may never return. Now, he did promise her that he'll come back, but she's kind of in that part where she believes that it is officially over. And so you have Colossus right now just trying to be that good friend for her, just trying to be in her corner, being like, hey, listen, he'll be back, but also get out of the rain before you get sick and everything. Now, for the rest of Excalibur, they're currently inside this building that belongs to Sebastian Shaw. And it's not really them meeting up with Sebastian, it's really more them meeting up with Rory Campbell. Now, for Rory Campbell, he wasn't really part of Excalibur. He worked for Moira McTaggart when it came to the idea of hopefully finding a cure for the legacy virus. Now, in the late 1990s, the legacy virus was kind of put on the back burner when it came to the X-Men. Now, with that being said, when it comes to Rory Campbell, he left the lab of Moira McTaggart to go team up with Sebastian Shaw. Now, he gave Sebastian some vital information about the legacy virus in trade for the idea using resources that Sebastian has to hopefully find a cure for the legacy virus. Now, we had learned in our X-Men videos when it came to Sebastian, he right now wants the legacy virus information to create a cure, but to use that cure to make in a lot of money. Either way, is Rory Campbell being able to meet up with his old friends from Excalibur. Now, for his old friends of Excalibur, they're kind of confused about the idea of why he's working for Sebastian. But you also have Nightcrawler saying Pete Wisdom to kind of snoop around to hopefully collect information about Sebastian and also Rory Campbell. And you do have Pete being able to snoop around the place, like looking at the computer that belongs to Rory Campbell. But while doing that, you also have Pete check his own emails as well. Here's the reason why, because in our last video for Pete Wisdom, he got an email from a character known as Beckham. Now, for Beckham, we're kind of left to believe that it's some kind of lady that he was kind of hoping that he would never see again. But unfortunately, she had popped up. And so for Pete here, he called up his old friend Jardine. Now, we saw Jardine in an earlier storyline. Him and Pete were like secret spies for Great Britain. Anyways, for Jardine, he was kind of able to get some information about Peckham, and he tells Pete in his computer message, or video message, sorry, to go to a certain location to get more information. The problem is that the video ends with Jardine dying. So there goes Pete's old friend, which of course makes Pete very concerned about the idea of who is possibly coming after him. Now, once you do have everyone being able to regroup with one another, you do have everyone sit down for dinner at this restaurant. Now, this is where things go south very quickly, and let me explain why. Because while you do have everyone sitting there, it's also Nightcrawler finding out that he didn't just lose Captain Britain, he also lost his longtime girlfriend, Amanda. Now, when it came to Amanda, she was also part of Excalibur. Fun fact here, guys, when it came to Nightcrawler, after Mystique had, I guess, lost Nightcrawler, he was founded by a character known as Margali. Now, I'm not going to sit down and try to explain who Margali was, but she had a daughter, Amanda. Now, technically for Amanda and also Nightcrawler, they were adoptive siblings, but it's the idea that over time they became a couple and boyfriend and girlfriend. But when it came to her and Kurt being able to stop their mother from trying to release a demon in London and the whole idea of the Hellfire Club in London, you kind of had Amanda begin to act a tad bit different. And so she told Colossus she has to leave the team. Now, unfortunately for Colossus, he was not really able to tell Nightcrawler about it because, well, they had the battle for Captain Britain, and then shortly after, this storyline right here. The dude forgot. And so it's now Kurt finding out like, hey, you know what? Your girlfriend is gone. But anyways, after all of that, you didn't have somebody whisper something into Kitty Pryde's ear. Now, once that happens, we are quickly reminded about a character known as Ogon. Now, we have talked a lot about Ogon over in our Wolverine videos, not really in our Excalibur videos. But anyways, for Ogon, he was like an old master, a mentor for Logan back in the day. Now, there was this storyline we did not cover because it took place before the Mutant Massacre. And so when it came to our coverage over the X-Men, we had started with the Mutant Massacre. Anyways, there was this storyline where Wolverine and Kitty Pryde were together, right? As, you know, good brother and sister or father and daughter bond. Anyways, for Orgon, he has the ability to cheat death. And let me explain. You see, for Orgon, he kind of changed the form of his body into this psychic form where he's then able to kind of take over different people's bodies in different types of ways. And so when it came to that first storyline, Wolverine and Kitty Pryde, he tried his best to take over the body of Kitty Pryde, which he was able to do, but Logan stopped him. Now, in our Wolverine videos, we have seen Orgon reappear over and over and over again. It's the idea that he has the ability to come back in different ways and take over people's bodies. And so right now, he came back for Kitty Pryde. Now, for the rest of this first chapter of this video, it's just Excalibur fighting against Orgon. But here's the thing, Pete Wisdom was able to scare Orgon out of the body of Kitty Pryde, which for me personally should not have worked. And the thing is, because you have Pete say, listen, I get the idea, you need a host. If the host dies, you die, which means if I kill Kitty Pryde, you will also die. And for Orgon, he's kind of like, dude, there's no way that you will kill your girlfriend. But for Pete, he's like, no, I will kill her to help her, to save her, to kill you as well. And so for Orgon, he does leave. Now, of course, as we all know, he'll probably be back again once again over in Wolverine Comics. Now, this kind of leads into the ending of the first chapter, but it sets up the last two chapters that we're going to cover in this video. Because what happens next is that you have the different members of Excalibur go their separate ways for different reasons. Like, for example, for Kitty Pryde and Wolfbane, they go back to Muir Island. For Nightcrawler and Pete Wisdom, they go over to Germany because they both apparently have business in Germany. And for Colossus and Megan, being friends at the moment, they're going over to a amusement park somewhere in the world. And so just like that, you have our heroes go their separate ways. The problem is that for Colossus and also Megan, they are then confronted by this suicide bomber on the plane who wants to kill off people like Colossus and also Megan. And so the chapter ends with the plane blowing up. And so as we dive into the second chapter, what we're getting at the moment, it's really more of us seeing, well, Colossus and also Megan just trying their best to survive. Like, the plane's going down pretty fast, and for Colossus, he really can't do much. Now, for Megan, with her elemental powers, she should be able to at least do something. The problem is that there's something kind of causing this feedback where it causes her a lot of pain. And so, with her not really being able to use her elemental powers to kind of help land the plane safely, for our heroes, they do crash in the mountains. And we're kind of left to wonder if they are okay at all. Now, we do shift over to, well, Nightcrawler and also Pete Wisdom. Now, remember, they're in Germany at the moment. And so, with them now being in Germany, you do have the two characters kind of go after one guy that Pete was looking for. And for Pete, he wants to know if this guy knows who killed off Jardine. Now, the thing is, this guy is not really able to give much information over to Pete Wisdom, but it's also him telling Pete, like, listen, I have no idea who had killed off who had killed off Jardine, but I do know like why he was killed off because you guys were getting a tad bit too close to something. And so for Pete, he's kind of like, okay, that's not good at all. Like, what could possibly happen down the road? And so while you have Nightcrawler and also Pete Wisdom trying their best to figure out what's going to be their next move, well, over for Colossus and also Megan, it's Colossus right now trying his best to keep her warm, but also make sure she does not die in his arms as he travels across the mountains they're currently stuck in at the moment. Now, we do shift over to Douglock and also Wolfbane. Now, when it comes to Douglock, we have to remember that technically he is not a mutant, that he is a phalanx. You see, when it came to the phalanx, they had this hive mind. But for Douglock, he was able to break away. Here's the reason why. Because for Douglock, he was created off the dead cells of a character known as Cypher, who died long ago in a storyline called Fall of the Mutants. Now, with his death being there, and also the death of Warlock, when it came to the Phalanx, they built Douglock off the dead cells of those two characters. And so for Douglock, he does kind of look like Doug, their old friend, Cypher. Now for Wolfbane, she had a crush on Doug before he died in the Fall of the Mutant storyline. And so over time, with her spending time with Douglock, that bond right now is also being built up in a way where she might fall in love with him. Now, with all that being said, when you do have her walk out the room, for Douglock, he reads her diary. And we kind of get the idea that he just found out there's a possibility that she has a crush on him. Now, to begin the process of us closing on the second chapter of the storyline, we do shift over to, well, Nightcrawler and Pete Wisdom again. And for these two characters, they had arrived at this location. Now, for Pete, he tried to go there by himself, but you had Nightcrawler being able to follow him. The problem is that while you have the two characters talking to one another, out of nowhere, they're jumped by a mysterious character. And of course, that character is most likely connected to Pete in some kind of way. And when it comes to Colossus and also, well, for Megan, they found out, really more Colossus finds out, that they're at Wundagore Mountain. Now, this concept right here will play a very major role over in Quicksilver Comics if you do sit down and cover his miniseries, because for Quicksilver, he got a miniseries, and I heard it was just okay, but this is also taking place prior to the idea of the heroes who had supposedly disappeared back in Onslaught event coming back into the main Marvel universe. You see what I mean here after getting to the third chapter. Now, this kind of shifts us over to the idea of the third chapter, right? And we kind of pick up with Wolfbane leaving to meet up with the New Mutants. Now, this storyline does take place prior to another storyline that we did where technically you had the New Mutants reunite for a good old catch up situation. And the problem was they were confronted by the past versions of themselves, but they also discovered like how Magic got the legacy virus. It was an interesting storyline, but at the same time, I kind of felt like it was just Marvel 1990s saying like, hey, we got to do anything we can and kind of keep us alive. So give us a random X story. Ooh, let's give a story how Magic got the legacy virus. I kind of hate the retcon. But anyways, it's her saying goodbye to her adoptive mother, better known as Moira McTaggart. So while you have Wolfbane leave to go meet up with the rest of the New Mutants, you have Douglock kind of want to know, like, should he follow after her? Now, you do have the two characters kiss as well. So for Douglock, he's kind of like, man, should I most definitely follow her? Now, we do learn that for Colossus and also for Megan, they are currently at the Wundagore Mountain. Now, Wundagore Mountain is very special for a set few of characters in the world of Marvel Comics, especially when it comes to Quicksilver, the Scarlet Witch, and also their mother. Now, here's the thing, because there's going to be a storyline we're going to follow over in Quicksilver Comics where, man, okay, get this. The Acolytes, right? The Acolytes are well known to treating Magneto as their god. Now, with the idea of Charles Xavier shutting down the mind of Magneto back in Fatal Attractions, you then had Exodus become the actual leader of the Acolytes. Now, again, they look at Magneto as, this godlike character. So around this time in Marvel Comics, for the Acolytes, they wanted to claim Wundagore Mountain for their own. And here's the reason why. Because for the Acolytes, they look at that place as the holy ground because of Magneto's wife, Magda. Because that was the last place that she was technically at. And so for them, they're kind of like, ooh, that area right there is good for our holy grounds for our people. We should claim it for ourselves. The problem was that on Wundagore Mountain, there is this huge laboratory that's currently being controlled by a character known as the High Evolutionary. Now, we had talked about this character a long time ago when it came to our coverage over, oh my God, what was that event called? Because we did every single chapter of that event, and for some reason, it's not in my head in the moment. It was called the Evolutionary War. But anyways, the High Evolutionary is a very interesting character, and really I'm not going to sit down and try to explain who he is, because for the sake of this video but also other videos down the road, I'm going to go ahead and just move forward here. But for the High Evolutionary, he built a lab on Wundagore Mountain. So of course the Acolytes, they want him gone, but they also want the mountain in the lab as well. Now, this whole storyline would take place in the Quicksilver series, I want to say. And honestly, this storyline right here does take place prior to the idea of the heroes coming back to Earth, the ones who are currently stuck right now in the Heroes Reborn reality. And the reason why I'm bringing it up right now, because for Quicksilver, he left his daughter behind, Luna, with the High Evolutionary, because her mother, Crystal, was one of the heroes that got transported over into the Heroes Reborn reality. Anyways, though, for Colossus and also for Megan, when they do arrive here to the Wundagore Mountain lab, they were confronted by the new men. The new men are just these creatures that evolved from animals, but they have human intelligence. Anyways, though, when it comes to these new men, they do take Colossus and also Megan over to the High Evolutionary. Now, for Colossus and also Megan, they want to help him out when it comes to fighting against the Acolytes to hopefully defeat them. But for the High Evolutionary, he believes that he should be able to actually win. And so he tells them no and teleports them out his lab and off the mountain completely. So just like that, we move on from Colossus and also Megan. Now we do shift over to Pete Wisdom. Now for Pete Wisdom, we currently see him as a prisoner. Now we're not really told what happened to Nightcrawler here at this point, but we do see Pete Wisdom be confronted by a new character known as Hobbins. Now, when it comes to Hobbins, we get the idea that she works for Black Air. Now, we'll see more of her in our next video, but for right now, for Hobbins, you need to know that Black Air was this organization that had replaced WHO. You see, for WHO, which stands for Weird Happening Organization, they used to work with the UK government. And then you had Black Air out of nowhere appear and replace WHO. But also, Black Air was working for the Hellfire Club in London and trying their best to kind of control the government from the inside out. Either way, you had Excalibur being able to bring down Black Air. The problem is that right now for Hobbins, she works for Black Air, and they're now coming after, well, Pete Wisdom, because Pete did work for Black Air for like a short period of time, but he also helped Excalibur bring them down. So, of course, he's kind of set at the moment.